to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have the folks from Mycology Now, Jordan and Lou. I met them a few weeks ago in Denver. Got to have a cool lunch with them, and we talk about that a little bit in the show. These guys make and sell spore syringes. Check it out at mycologynow.com. They've got a bunch of varieties, and they are very passionate about the work. So this is why we wanted to do the episode, and you can hear all about it. I guess that's good enough of an intro for right now. If you want to help support the show, we've got a Patreon where you can leave us $1 or $2 a month if you want to, or more. And there's all sorts of perks in there. If you want to take our course, Navigating Psychedelics, you can always do that. But upcoming, we have two different live editions, one for therapists, and we've only got a few seats left in that one, and another one for a general audience. So if you like to go to festivals, you've got a lot of friends using psychedelics, or you yourself are interested in using, this is a great way to reduce harm, get ahead of any kind of risks that might come down the pipeline, and to maximize any kind of benefit that might come your way as well. So check that out at psychedelics.today.com. We would love to hear that you've shared this with some friends. So if you share this with a friend, we would love you forever. So check that out and perhaps leave us a review on iTunes. I guess that's it for now. Thank you all for tuning in, and see you on the other side. All right, everybody, welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have Lou and Jordan from Mycology Now. Thank you for joining us, guys.
Thank you so much for having us, Joe. We really appreciate it. Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't wait. So, I got the opportunity to meet you guys down in Denver, a month or two ago? And that was really cool.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Actually, almost exactly a month, late August, which is really cool. in an interesting sandwich shop that was like pot themed, Chiba Hut.
So good. So good.
Delicious.
Way better than Subway.
One of my favorites. All right, so let's hear a little bit about you guys. You're both living in Florida. What else would you like to share about yourselves personally?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 24 years old, and I'm a part owner of mycologynow.com, and I have a wife of 5 years now. We got married at 19, and she's been just such a beautiful supporting factor in my life, and we opened up this company in the area, and we're just really, really proud to have a company in an area that we grew up in.
Yeah, and I consider myself a lifetime student. I'm still in college, and I found the time to help start a business here with Lou. And also growing up in Sarasota and being born here in Florida, it was just only natural.
Very cool. Very cool. And Mycology Now, how do you like to describe the company?
Lou?
So we sell psilocybe cubensis mushroom spores for use in microscopy. So essentially, you take the mushroom spore and you put it underneath a slide, and you examine the genetic profile of the spore underneath the microscope. So that's essentially what the company is. But we are much, much more than that.
Great. You started being able to recently provide those in Denver, I saw, not just Florida, but also mail order. Is that right?
Yes.
Correct.
Absolutely, Jordan.
So we also, in addition to straight to our consumers, we're also starting to develop some business-to-business relationships. Here in Florida, we started off by selling to some local smoke shops and giving them a display case with our product and enough knowledge to where they can sell them coherently. And we made our way out to Denver, and that's where we met you, actually, at the Chiba Hut while we were scooting around on our electric scooters, hopping from one smoke shop to the next. And right now we actually have 2 locations in Denver, and hoping to add quite a bit more as the season continues.
Great. And could you tell us a little bit about like what your mission is with the business?
Absolutely, 100%.
Absolutely.
So our mission is to spread spores and knowledge through engaging with our customers in an honest and transparent communication. And we do that a lot on our Instagram, on our Facebook, and most recently we've started an education page on our website where we've linked a bunch of resources for people to go and explore this knowledge on their own.
Absolutely.
And then, Lou, if you want to take our vision statement.
Yeah, for sure. And essentially, we wanted to not necessarily be another Spore company just providing, another product out there, deep in the depths of someone's website, but really be transparent in what we really want to provide for people. So not only, this product, but also the education and the research that people need to learn about so that they can be better acquainted with psilocybe cubensis mushroom spores so that they can research them to the best of their ability and really using them for the internal experience rather than the external experience to better themselves with that knowledge.
Cool. And how did you come to that? Was there like a personal turning point that happened for you, or how did that work out?
Absolutely. Well, on a personal level, I struggled with depression for a very, very long time, both in my adolescence and in my young adult years. And, I was on everything from, Lexapro to Prozac to Xanax and Ambien at a very young age, which attracts some undesirables for sure. But at the same rate, I had this struggle for a very, very long time. And, I've had suicidal tendencies and went to the hospital twice. And I really was kind of at the end of the line. And I heard about specifically Johns Hopkins Psychedelic Research Unit being run by Roland Griffith and Matthew Johnson. And the information that they released about the double-blind study that affected people with depression caused by a cancer diagnosis. And I found it, really interesting. And at that point in my life, I just said, why not? I've already tried literally everything. And so I followed the Terrence McKenna's 5 grams of mushrooms on an empty stomach in silent darkness with the help of my wife. And I came out from the realization of that my depression completely was erased. The suicidal tendencies and the suicidal thoughts were just gone, the day after. And it was a hard thing to take, it was a hard experience because I was confronting things that I didn't necessarily want to confront. But the thing that helped the most was the day after. And after realizing that, going through years of struggling just to come to the conclusion that all I had to do was take some mushrooms and close my eyes for it to, all be gone. And I think from that, that obviously made a really big impression when we first started. And we, kind of realized that, we could actually provide this for other people that were seeking it in the same way that I was in the beginning. And after getting some correspondence with some veterans with PTSD, some correspondence with some individuals also struggling from depression, and found that these things do help. And after you start getting thanked, from veterans, and it's like, whoa, like you don't need to thank me. Like this is so easy. Like just you can have it, just take it. Like you deserve it. So after, talking to people that were also, kind of at the end of the line and talking to people that had kind of the same experiences as I and Jordan as well, I think that really solidified the resolve for us to provide a product that people could depend on, count on, not depend on.
Yeah, that's huge. Did you... Jordan, did you have any kind of story in particular?
I did actually. Mine goes back pretty far as well. It originally started when I was about 10 years old and still a child. And my mom was actually in a relationship with a man, and this man was an abuser in more ways than one. There was physical, emotional. He abused narcotics and opioids in particular, so I'm sure that only inflamed the issues and arguments only more. During this period for me, I carried so much pain and just hurt feelings that I wasn't good enough and I wasn't worthy of love. And as a child, somebody who's young, I didn't really understand why this was happening to me, why I deserved what I was going through. And because of that, I blamed myself for what had happened. There was no one else there, and I was unmature, so that's what I did. And for almost a decade, I lived with this inside of me, my pain, and also underlying some of my attitudes and my own ego. And about 2 years ago, I discovered mushrooms, and I had one of the most profound shifts in my life that I had ever experienced. And I was actually able to go back to these parts, these really painful memories in my childhood, and then I could view them through the lens of an adult and with the comprehension of someone who's mature enough to understand that none of that was my fault. And while negative things did happen to me and to my family, I was not the cause of it, and I shouldn't have to carry that around with me. And the following feelings of absolution and just pure joy that I felt in the ensuing days really just made me realize how powerful this really was. And I want to do everything in my power to bring that to other people, because I think it can really change the world, and people at Johns Hopkins are certainly proving that for everybody to see for themselves.
So I'm seeing some analogies in your stories to like Paul Stamets's story about being stuck in the top of that tree, like the lightning storm, being on far too many mushrooms.
Yes.
What did he claim? Something like 13 grams or something insane like that?
Something crazy, man. I would have to look back at the actual transcripts, but it was quite a fair amount.
Right.
The
That's
tablets.
pretty wild. And now, so I was coming of age when this kind of dialogue around psychedelics wasn't common at all. Rogan didn't exist. Paul Stamets was fringe.
Taboo was strong.
I had to really dig deep in books. Are you seeing a change in younger folks in their 20s in their kind of attitude towards psychedelics at all?
Absolutely. I've been pretty frequent in the, I would say, live entertainment industry. I've had a lot of experiences and in those experiences, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people of my own age, and I'm really interested in other people's thought patterns because we're all so different, and it's so interesting to get other people's perspectives on things. And the one thing that I've really noticed about our generation is they are a lot more open and accepting of these kinds of ideas, as opposed to somebody maybe in their 30s and 40s who have already had these neural impulses steadied through, and they can't really accept any new information. So I think with the acceptance and malleability of the younger age, they're definitely more on the wave of psychedelics.
Most certainly. And I think, just as far as like self-care is concerned, because I mean, we're kind of in the midst of like the opioid crisis, right? So that's kind of a direct problem associated specifically with opioids, and that causes quite a bit of distrust with the community and the country, really. So I think that was a really big eye opener for a lot of people. That just because it's a company and a large company doesn't mean that they necessarily are 100% like they care about your health, right? So with that said, I think people are a little bit geared towards self-care now because of the information that's available.
Yeah, and if I might just add one more quick thing on that. Lou mentioned information that's available, and that is 100% true. We are living in an age of information that has almost never been experienced before. And these people have the tools, the literal tools in their hand, a phone, a computer, to break the stigma on their own just by educating themselves. And that's really why we're here.
Exactly.
That's
to
amazing.
Shatter the stigma. Right.
The stigma is huge. And I'm personally like seeing it probably similar to how you are. Well, actually, no. Let's I keep forgetting that you're in Florida, in a quite conservative part of Florida too. But I'm living in Colorado where it's pretty normalized. Like I can even talk to 70-year-olds quite regularly about psychedelics, and it's totally fine. They're like, yeah, last
awesome.
week was cool, Whereas in Florida, you're like dealing with a really
all
different
the
culture.
time.
Could you talk about the kind of scene in Florida a little bit?
Yeah.
Lou, why
That
don't you take this
CBD
one?
story might be telling.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yes, the CBD story, yes. Okay, so in Sarasota, there's, some raids specifically with like CBD, right? So, I mean, even that sounds absolutely ridiculous. Like people being harassed that are just trying to sell CBD. But with that said, like our average age here in specifically Venice, Florida, I believe is 55 years old. So there is this disproportion in understanding on certain topics, right? So psychedelics, like one in particular. So there's definitely, it's definitely like yin and yang, right? Like you either get, younger people that are in agreement and have the information and are active in understanding it. And then you also have the people who grew up with this taboo or stigma associated with characters like Timothy Leary, who they associate psychedelics with. So yeah, we definitely have like a polarization, I guess you could say.
100%, and especially when you have police force and tactical gear, like full SWAT tactical gear coming into smoke shops, that is just an optic that is absurd and ridiculous to the highest degree. You don't need a full tactical SWAT team with weapons to take away a CBD plant concentrate. And that's what's going on here in Sarasota, and it's certainly different than when we were in Denver, 100%. And I wish the rest of the world can start moving in the direction that you guys have started to go into.
Yeah, I think we're getting it like in time. Well, that's one of the interesting things about the U.S. is that nowhere else, I don't think, in the world has this country with so much diversity and government diversity. And it's almost like there's
100%.
experiments being run real time about, who's the most successful or where, what does success even mean? Is it just about staying conservative? Is it about attracting young and bright minds to boost, economic dollars? Is it environment?
Right.
What
What's
is
the
it?
definition?
More live concerts?
Right.
Or, what is it? Like Denver's absurd.
What's the metric?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, how do we even look at that? And, I think my home state, New Hampshire, is just kind of having a population collapse because we just barely got decriminalized recently.
Wow.
And it's probably never going to go recreational, at least not in the next 5 years, because those folks are so conservative. But they're just surrounded by legal states.
Exactly.
Conservative holdout in the Northeast, which you wouldn't really think the Northeast has that, but it's there.
Northeast, yeah, but it's there.
New Hampshire, it's certainly there and alive and well. And I guess it might take like some sort of financial crisis like California had to kind of reframe what's next.
Reframe it, yeah. I could see that.
Yeah. Anyway, let's jump back to y'all. Okay, you had these experiences, and then you wanted to get involved. Like, how did it look when you guys formed your company? Like, did you just kind of start going?
Well, Lou actually started it, so I'll let Lou take this one.
Okay. It more or less was like pretty organic. It started off with marketplaces, not even on our own website. But it just kind of organically grew into a website and just learning every day about the culture and learning every day about specifically the product. And I sound like a broken record, but again, it just kind of it grew itself. I almost feel, I know this sounds a little bit weird, but I almost kind of feel like a vessel, right? Like I don't even necessarily matter. I'm just kind of two hands, that are
doing the work.
I don't.
Yeah.
That's how I view it.
Yeah. That's cool.
I can't take, credit for Mother Nature.
And that's totally not uncommon, right? Like that's not an uncommon story, especially in like the plant-based
ethos,
psychedelic world. Like that's wildly common in the ayahuasca space. It's just like this thing just took me over and I wanted to do good and this was a way to do good.
100%. Basically sums it up. Yeah, and
And again, I mean, when it's not even necessarily like just the mushroom. I mean, it did have a lot to do with the correspondence. From people talking about how it actually helped them specifically, not even just on a personal basis, but on the basis of other people. So I think that also had a lot to do with it. Positive reinforcement. People who are genuinely being affected by this in a positive way, and I don't think people would come forward and talk about how it affects them positively if that wasn't the case.
Yeah. Are you being contacted pretty regularly by people who are helped by mushrooms?
Yeah, I mean, we've had about like 5 correspondents or so of individuals, but I mean, like you can look on Instagram and Facebook and see people's testimonials. It's not even necessarily 100% directed towards our company, but those experiences definitely had a lot of weight. But just, I mean, if you were just to look at mushroom testimonials, they also have a lot of weight to them, and I don't see a massive propaganda program, to push out, false information about this. So,
yeah, that's huge. It's really interesting to like your timing and Psychedelics Today's timing in this world where Tim Ferriss and others just donated gazillions of dollars to both Imperial College London and this new independent center at Hopkins, which is amazing.
Amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
And specifically, it's interesting because it's not MDMA. Like MAPS has plenty of funding, it seems like, for MDMA work. And now we have all this kind of psilocybin-based.
Starting to gear up, yeah.
Right. And that's some serious momentum. So I think in the next year, like I think 2020 is going to be a real year for this movement.
100%.
Not like 2019 wasn't. But
it's even more so, which makes it even more incredible.
Yeah. I mean, like you just mentioned, Johns Hopkins opened a $17 million center for, research into psychedelics. And that is huge. $17 million from private donors, not government money, meaning they can research whatever they want without any kind of hurdles to jump through to, have any government funding. So that's really going to push the envelope.
Absolutely.
Gives them a lot more to work with, I think.
So a cultural indicator is this, like what segments of the population have been hit? In Colorado, one of my friends was overhearing this conversation at brunch one day with this table of like early 50s, like kind of yoga housewives, not to be dismissive or anything.
Okay.
That's just the type of person.
Descriptive.
And they were talking about how they were all talking about DMT the whole time. And they were all like in, Neiman Marcus style clothes or whatever. And the long and short is, it was really cool. I'll probably do it again, but I don't think it's part of my weekly program. It's like, wow, that's a sign of the times that this kind of conversation is happening at brunch somewhere.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's not just like Paul Stamets talking about the neurogenesis stack.
No,
it's someone at brunch.
Real people.
Heck yeah.
Right. How do you like to talk about that the Paul Stamets stack? Do you ever discuss that? Like the niacin, lion's mane, cubensis?
100%.
Absolutely. Go ahead, sorry.
It's something like we've really been energized by and impassioned by, especially all of the research that's come out just alone from his testimonials, specifically about the auditorial changes that you can measure. So apparently on this Paul Stamets stack of psilocybin, lion's mane, and niacin, you can increase your ability to hear frequencies. And he said one of his friends was able to hear the waves of the ocean for the first time. That's incredible.
A deaf man.
A deaf man, yeah, and that's insane. And that is a measurable way to see the difference in your brain growth.
Absolutely. And I think one of the beautiful things about Paul Stamets' neurogenesis stack is that it creates these cognitive differences in the brain, but also it the niacin, right? So the niacin increases blood flow throughout the body, right, which causes flushing, which makes the psilocybin more readily available and the lion's mane more readily available before it's metabolized. I believe that's the way. But at any rate, the niacin, if you were to take it in large amounts, say, quote unquote, abuse or whatever, the niacin would be so uncomfortable that it would actually be a deterrent to this quote unquote abuse that, people talk about, which I think is very impressive, because not only is the mechanisms of the stack all important for what the stack needs to do, but even having a mechanism in there to fight against abuse. I mean, it's just genius. It's just genius to have a minuscule amount to entice crosstalk between the brains and entice neurons to fire that normally wouldn't fire. I think is just a huge stride in the psychedelic space. So just hats off for days. Yeah. So
it's really interesting to see what he's done with that and how popular that's become. I think he presented it at Psychedelic Science 2017.
Yeah.
Like a fan art poster here on my wall, which is really cool.
yeah.
I think about it every day.
Yes.
And Paul Stamets it was giving slides on this stack at this conference. I think this might have been the first time he was public about it. And it was pretty extraordinary to see him kind of play it out. And
absolutely,
the implications to so many people is amazing here. Like, for instance, I've been talking to a lot of veterans of war recently, and what's happening beyond even PTSD is a lot of traumatic brain injury from not only explosives blowing up and hurting them, but shooting a large caliber gun too much, or shooting a mortar 100 times a day,
which your ear.
There's some issues around shooting mortars 100 times a day beyond hurting the individual that's shooting it. But that said, that's a ton of concussive force hitting the brain at a very regular interval. And I think what we might find is that a lot of veterans have CTE. What's that called? Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, I think. The football players are showing, like most NFL players have this. And it can only be diagnosed after they're dead, which is awful.
Holy moly.
Yeah. So you might be able to, you have to do a full on brain biopsy.
Yeah.
And horrifying at this point. That's at least based on my reading. So what if this stack, not only healing people through psychedelic based therapies, but also healing the fabric through which the mind seems to interface with the world, the brain. And
right, absolutely. Repairing neurological damage.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly there, and I think there's certainly possibilities for that to start to pop up.
Yeah, we just really need to figure out, how do we study this? There's so many studies that need to be done. And it's great that Hopkins and the school in London have all this funding now, but how do we do all the research that needs to happen?
With time.
Absolutely.
Hopefully more and more money comes in.
Absolutely.
And more money. Yes, 100%.
March of science is somewhat slow, but
it is, but I think we're on the exponential rise finally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, true. At this point in history, you can use that word and not be laughed at, right?
Exactly.
There's a school, Singularity University, that's kind of based around this concept of how do we leverage exponential technology as much as possible. And that's their fundamental thing. It's pretty interesting. It comes out of the guy that did the X Prize.
It's ultimate innovation.
Remember that rocket race? And I think there was a solar X Prize too. Yeah. So how do we leverage this stuff in an exponential fashion? And psychedelics, I think, are an exponential technology for helping folks. It's exponentially better than talk therapy for a lot of folks. So
absolutely. How do we, progressing, right? Yeah. Obviously, the internet is very helpful, but also just bolstering individuals to, come out of the dark and really talk about it, right? Because, the first form of change is communication. That's, why we're here today. We don't want to, hide in our rooms, and just, like I said, sell spores or whatever. What would that do? That would, so anyway, that's,
That's great. So how do you guys think about psychedelics as a culture change agent? We're at a really rough patch of history. It's also an exciting patch of history. But how do you think this data from psychedelic research might be impacting our collective future on the planet? deep question.
No, of course. I'll take that one. So right now we are living in an unprecedented age. We are living in a time where some people have said it's the worst time in history, and some people say it's the best time in history. And I'm on the side, I think it's the best time in history. People haven't had more rights than they have in, any other time and period in recorded history. People have more free will to say what they want in any fashion that they can than any other time in history. And right now, with the collective future of how this is going, I think that there is a lot of incentive and a lot of hunger for more information and honestly for more digestible ways of discerning the information that's presented to them. And, let's be honest, these bulky research papers, they're hard to get through. For all of us,
a conclusion.
All of us laymen's out here, and I think presenting that in a digestible format for people that has a sense of credibility behind it, such as these prestigious universities, that's going to start to form that shift, that global shift, and it's already forming. It's only going to get bigger.
Yeah, that's
Does that
huge.
answer your question?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, the safest time in history ever. The least children are dying ever in history proportionally. There's so
information is free.
Yeah, so much free information.
Is free.
It used to be illegal to have a Bible, even though it was, what everybody was supposed to follow.
I didn't know that. Wow.
There used to be book burnings, like...
Oh, yeah.
Just...
Yeah, I'm sure there's still book burnings, but not government sanctioned, at least around here.
No.
None that we know of. I mean,
and that's the thing in the grand scheme of things. That's really what you got to look at, the big picture
certainly.
here,
and how it's affecting people today.
Back to that Bible point, it was illegal to have the Bible in your language, in the vernacular, like German or English. So when the first German or English Bible came out, that was quite a profound situation.
They were like the bad boys of the Bible.
Yeah, man, a lot of people got killed over that. Yeah, like Martin Luther's era and all that kind of stuff that was going on at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Typically change is pretty painful, but hopefully this one won't.
Right. For something new to be born, something old has to die. Creation is necessarily destructive. And it's a very
100%.
Interesting problem. But, psychedelics can really help us understand the impermanence of things and that things
I would agree.
Should be in flow. Stasis is
certainly.
not necessarily healthy.
No, definitely not. Stasis
or, it's just an artificial construct, stasis. Like, it's not real. Like, even in the Communist Party in USSR, things looked static, but it was really not.
Looked static, but it's really not, no. Appearances can definitely be deceiving, 100%.
Yeah. So who out there in, like, the psychedelic world are some inspirations for you guys?
Absolutely. Well, we kind of touched on Paul Stamets a little bit. He was, a really big motivating factor. I love to watch him. I'm a big fan of Terence McKenna personally. I know a lot of people, see him as kind of like a mystical type character, but I found that, for me, especially with the talk about the 5 grams of mushrooms on an empty stomach, it really. He really was the pinnacle to really start all of this, right? And he was like the person to go to learn about mushrooms for a while. Him and Dennis McKenna. That was a huge motivating factor. And then another motivating factor was actually from his story about a tolerance, right? So he did a 5 gram trip, and then a week later he was gonna do another trip, in his early 20s, and he did, I believe, 9, or he jumped up to 9, something like 9. That. And what he found was that during the trip, there's this giant woman in bondage that comes over him and looks at him, and he said, excuse me for being crass, but he says, "Is this strong enough for you, asshole?" And that's beautiful, in and of itself, because it sets the stage for it sets the stage for respecting the mushroom and respecting the power of it, and really trying to understand what it's trying to tell you in the subconscious level. Because when you're having these experiences, and I'm not a doctor or anything, but I would imagine it would be from the subconscious, because it's within your own brains. It's your neurons firing. It's your memories that you're going and revisiting. So I think the combination of Paul Stamets, Terrence and Dennis McKenna, and who not to look at, Timothy Leary also was a motivating factor for me, someone that I personally didn't agree with. So I think those three characters were really the catalyst that solidified my understanding of what mushrooms are.
Can we expand a little bit on Paul Stamets? Like, what in particular about Paul really worked for you?
Sure. Heck yeah. I like his nonchalant, way of speaking. And every time he speaks, he talks about Ken Casey, and he talks about, not only how psychedelics can help people, but really the cultural discussion over psychedelics as well. So I think seeing someone on the world stage like that talk about mushrooms in a nonchalant way, and really talking and encouraging people to better themselves, really bolstered me personally, and I think Jordan as well, to take part in it and to not be afraid. And I think Paul Stamets definitely for me was a huge motivating factor in not being afraid and stepping out into the world stage just like he did. And the more people that do it, the more people that roll with it and really, go with this wave that we were talking about. I really think if they were to take his example and some other examples as well, we could really see a beautiful evolution of where psychedelics will go.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's cool. And Jordan, how about for you? Do you have any, other than those three, Terrence, Paul, and Tim Leary, anything in particular?
In terms of people that I look up to, or
right, like major influences.
Major influences.
It doesn't necessarily have to be psychedelic advocates, right? It could be anybody.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
I got this answer. So I would say major influences for me would be somewhat a little bit unexpected. It would be people that I met at music festivals. So I'm a pretty, what's the word? I'm a very friendly person. I like to meet people, I like to talk to people, and I like to ask them questions. And when you go to music festivals, you will find people on psychedelics there. And having conversations with these people really opened my eyes to what honesty was and what being authentic was. When you see people in an environment where they feel like they can have full expression of themselves without any kind of negativity or judgments being placed on them, you really see a blossoming of the person and of the self. And these were the major motivating factors for me, was meeting real people who had real lives and had real change in their lives and really, really enjoyed themselves because of these profound experiences they were feeling. So major influences for me were real people.
That's huge. I do really appreciate meeting these folks at festivals, because that honesty is impactful.
It blew me away, honestly. I had been welcomed into groups as family, and I had just met these people 10 minutes ago. That's pretty profound.
Right, the utmost levels of trust. Feeling trusted like that. A lot of us in America don't feel trusted like that. Everybody's suspicious of you. That makes quite a mark on your psyche, right?
Most certainly.
I would agree.
And not to mention everything else you can learn, right? For instance, I met somebody who told me all about his project to perfect DMT cartridges.
Wow.
He gave me the rundown of years of research. And I was like, wow, man, if this was a patented thing, that would be the most extraordinary trade secret,
Sure, absolutely.
You definitely meet people with interesting ideas and interesting experiences there.
Exactly, yeah. And Lou, I'm kind of interested in what you thought about Tim Leary. You made a comment there that I wanted to dig into a little bit, see what you meant.
Yeah, absolutely. So the drop out, turn on, and tune in, rhetoric, and I'm very against saying that every person or every person needs psychedelics or is in need of, or everyone should, because that is not it. And you have people like Roland Griffith, who actually said specifically, people with manic disorders or psychotic disorders or schizophrenia, that can really push them over the edge, and that is a huge motivating factor for us, because we don't want to be another Spore company. We want to be a source of information so that people can make the best educated decisions for themselves when they research psilocybe cubensis mushroom spores in the privacy of their own home. So with that said, I don't side with and I don't agree that everyone should take psychedelics. I do not agree with that at all, and I think that type of rhetoric should be removed so the stigma can die with him. Sorry, I mean, that was a bit intense.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's an interesting conversation, right?
Yeah.
Tim and Terrence are not too dissimilar. And Tim was a showman, the same way Terrence is a poet, right? So it's like they're both putting on a show, and it wasn't necessarily the truth of what was happening under the covers. And even Dennis McKenna talks about this with his brother. I suggest having at some point connecting with Zach Leary, Tim's son. He's still around. I've had him on the show maybe twice now. He's
That's awesome.
Really cool guy. I like him a lot.
Cool.
And he's definitely turned more towards meditation, but he's also, still quite interested in psychedelics. I don't like, because Tim's best buddy, Ramdas, Richard Alpert, kind of went that same route, and Zach got to spend a lot of time with Ramdas. So it was like kind of this really intelligent merging of kind of two things, both really helpful.
Sure. Absolutely.
Like, of course, not everybody needs to take it. It's kind of absurd to say that in the first place, right? But Tim, I suggest reading some books about Tim too. It's a really weird cultural situation, what was happening at the time, and he had his own stuff going on in his psyche that made him do what he did in the ways he did it.
And I don't mean to, pass like any judgment or anything like that. I feel like words are very, very important, and specific calculated words are very, very important. And that's all. That's all I have to say. And especially with a figure that has pull like Timothy Leary, I think it just it calls to say, like, yes, I have a position in this culture and my words mean things to people. So that's essentially where I was going. Not necessarily judgment to his actions or his thoughts, just to be careful on how we communicate with the public.
Clear and precise language and transparency is, very important to us, obviously, as we mentioned a little bit earlier. So going towards some sort of, ultimatum of like it's all everybody or it's nobody, it's a little too one-sided for us.
Yeah, totally.
And I think for most people.
And the history is interesting because folks like Aldous Huxley, Alan Watts, and others were watching him
Alan
closely.
Watts.
Oh man, I was actually sleeping to Alan Watts last night. Some lectures. It was very helpful at 4 a.m.
I can imagine.
It's so funny. We were just listening to Alan Watts the other day.
Yeah, we were doing some website work while we were listening to one of his lectures.
Oh, so good.
Yeah,
so good. So
awesome.
Let's maybe talk about what kind of spores you have available, and what that looks like when folks order.
Right now we have Cambodian Gold, B+, which is a Florida native. We have Bonsai Ponca. We have
PE6.
PE6, thank you. Z strain, and
we just got psilocybe cyanescences.
Cyanescences, yeah.
And those are going to be put up on the website probably within the next few days here.
Absolutely. I believe we have it on schedule for Thursday.
That's
and
great.
For our bulk options for people in smoke shops, we have a display box that goes into the smoke shop. It's $250 for the box, and you get 20 syringes in that box. And then for refills, it's $200 for 20 syringes for the refills. And essentially, the store owners are basically doubling their money when they sell our product. But the stores are specifically only B+ strain for ease of the customer.
Yeah, and just starting out too, we want it to be easier on everybody. It shouldn't be so confusing where you have to like research different strains and like different techniques to like maybe apply them to your microscope. You know, we really just wanted to give them an easy start into their microscopy future. And in the future, we do have plans to roll out several different strains with our commercial businesses. And to touch a little bit, I think you said how we like ship them and stuff. Basically, we've have a sterile holding area, and whenever the new day arises, we see what we have to ship out, and we package it very, very carefully. Honestly, everything is measured out, and we know exactly how much we use of everything, and we really try to preserve the sterile conditions that they so desperately need.
Mm-hmm. Also adding, really loading up the spore syringes as well, because a common theme for, I guess you could call it an excuse, is, they're microscopic, so you can't see them with the naked eye. But we really like to just load them up, so you shake it and you go, oh, there they are, because
100%. So basically most spore syringes from online stores that you'll get, and I've bought from a couple online stores too before we started our own.
Right,
and
of course.
When I received them in the mail, you can't really see what's in there. Like Lou said, they're microscopic, they're really small. Now we put enough spores in there to where you get like a solid clot, and a clot is basically where all the spores come together and they like to be friendly, and then you just have this clot floating around, and that way you know that's actually in there. You can visually see it with your eyes before you put it on your microscope and have the most pristine viewing experience that you could hope for.
That's really cool. I've seen some of those syringes where you can barely tell that they're spores, and that's really disappointing and questionable. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what kind of economy is that you're trying to skimp
on something
on
that is
2 cents? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the one.
And what I can say that is ordering from a company like yours, you know exactly what you're getting, as opposed to you buy from a strange website or forum or something, or it's like Spore Trades. You don't know what you're getting, the sterility level.
No.
I heard a story once of somebody getting shipped a live culture, which is super illegal. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Absolutely. Mycelium has.
Yeah, that's not good
no
at all. And definitely none of that going on here. One of the things we really sets us apart from all the other spore companies is we donate $1 from every sale to Johns Hopkins Psychedelics research, and I haven't seen any other spore company do any kind of donation to psychedelic research.
That's really huge.
Because it's more than just profit for us. Profit isn't even really part of it.
Yeah,
it's
honestly,
it's just an appendage.
You're familiar with this triple bottom line accounting for businesses like yours? So this is a somewhat new phenomenon where you actually, you've got your finances, but you've also got other metrics built in, like how many trees did we plant, how many dollars went to like a scholarship.
Yes.
So you actually have that on your balance sheet quarter over quarter, so you can go like, okay,
different
what do we
metrics
need to
of
do
success.
how do we get Johns Hopkins $17 more million, which I hope you're able to do.
That's so next level. Heck yeah, dude. Yes.
That's a great way of measuring your company's success. I like that idea.
Heck yeah, dude. Yeah. That's implemented. Thank you.
Right? You're not, there's only a handful of businesses where people are only focused on money. Even if you have a successful business, you're probably looking at other things.
Right.
Like this guy, Ray Dalio, one of the most successful investors ever, donates tons of money to ocean conservation efforts, and he's doing pretty whack hedge fund stuff, but he's also donating a ton of money to the planet, which is cool. So
which is really cool.
Even at the small level and the extraordinary Bill Gates level, people are trying to measure impact and have a better impact year over year. So it's a really cool thing.
That is really cool.
So we got about 5 minutes left. I'm wondering what y'all might want to jump into. If there's anything else that we missed.
I would like to talk about my sister, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, right on. My sister was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. She had a double mastectomy, and she actually was diagnosed with depression after she received this diagnosis. And this obviously it affected all of us, but obviously it affected her the most. And she after we were talking a little bit about it, and I was talking to her about the health benefits and stuff, she decided that she would try it. And after taking 5 grams, she ended up laying down with this sense of disconnect from her body. And she was basically talking to me about how she felt as though her body was a burden. And she was able to think about things in a way that she didn't even know existed. She was able to communicate with her husband after the fact on how she wanted to deal with her end-of-life care. And with that said, just being able to talk about those things with her husband in a free manner, she said, that was so relieving to be able to talk truthfully about death. And she even mentions in the plateau of it all that she felt as though she died. And then being reborn back into this body with this new outlook on life, and having that sense of the way she explained it to me is having that sense of okay, I died and then came back, having an understanding of what death might feel like. That death anxiety was washed away. And it's been about 3 months since she took the 5 gram dose. And 3 months later, she hasn't had any depressed episodes, any crying fits about self-loathing attitude. And it has really, really helped her, and I think it can really, really help other people out there that are suffering from cancer.
That's huge and amazing. I'm really happy you were able to experience that. That was one of the most impactful things that really hit me in the literature, at least, around psychedelics. Was I don't know if you know this, but Hopkins and that Baltimore region have a really long history of psychedelic research, and people with really scary diagnoses like that have got a tremendous amount of help. And
100%.
These new studies are great, but we've known this for a long time. So what can we do? What can we do? It's a really big deal.
What can we do?
You can make a spore company.
You can. Well, I don't want to see too much competition for you, but you can.
No, why not?
Yeah.
Right. Just more people getting out there, right? The world needs to be populated with more folks doing this stuff and really making a difference.
More voices.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And empowered to do so. If you've got a job in software, or you're a salesperson for some sort of electronics, can you really talk about psychedelics? Not necessarily without getting fired, but if you've got a company that can help you and supports it, you've then been liberated. You can come out of the closet, and by coming out of the closet, you can save people from so much suffering.
Yes, sir.
Exactly. So much. And just through open, honest communication and relevant information.
Yes.
Credible information.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, Lou. What I'm feeling right now is I have all this stuff kind of intellectually, but I haven't had to have those conversations with close loved ones with scary diagnoses yet. I've certainly lost a number of family members and people close to me, but never had the chance to go there, which, we should all have somewhat mixed feelings about that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're human.
And, how do we just get a little bit better every day?
Absolutely.
We don't need to be the Dalai Lama tomorrow, but maybe we can be better than him in 70 years or something. Whatever better means,
Yeah, whatever.
I think
it's different stuff for different folks.
100%.
Okay, and anything else before we kind of wrap here? Mycologynow.com.
Mycologynow.com. Yeah, shameless plug. At mycology_now on Instagram, and
You can find us on Facebook.
A really fun Instagram, by the way.
Oh, thank you so
thanks.
much.
Yeah, I give hats off to Lou. He does a really good job with that. Keeping up with that.
I love it when people do good Instagrams. They just make me laugh on the regular. I'm like, oh, thank goodness these people are out there doing that.
It's wonderful. If I could just say this one quick fact from one of the Johns Hopkins studies that was done. All right, so there was a study done, and it was about smoking cessation. All right, and here's the fact for you. 80% of people were abstinent at a 6-month follow-up. 80% who, here it is, smoked 19 cigarettes per day for an average of 31 years and an average of 6 previous lifetime quit attempts. That's crazy. 80% of those people aren't smoking cigarettes today because of the people at Johns Hopkins.
It's extraordinary.
That's it. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that has been our biggest resolve here at mycologynow.com, is to really put out the information that's being created for everyday people like us, and also put out a quality product that people can rely on, who are in need.
All right, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. Lou and Jordan from Mycology Now. I hope to catch up again in the future, and hit me up whenever you're in Colorado.
Will do, man.
100%.
Right,
we'll get another Chiba Sud.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Heck yeah, dude. All right. Much love, brother. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Psychedelics Today with Jordan and Lou of Mycology Now. They were really fun to chat with, and they are obviously very passionate about it and have reasons to be, so check it out at mycologynow.com, see what they've got on offer, and perhaps buy some spores. So, again, if you want to support the show, leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook. We would love it, or the iPhone podcast app, or check out our classes at psychedelicsa.com under online classes. We've got a live 5-week course for both the general audience and therapists and clinicians. So check it out at psychedelicsa.com. This is Joe Moore signing off.